This is Call the Psychiatrist, the show where psychiatrists answer your questions. I'm Dr. David Hanley.
And I'm Dr. Abby Snavely.
On today's episode, we have two listener questions. The first question comes from an expectant father who's wondering if he qualifies for therapy. The second listener wants to know if being a psychiatrist makes for awkward social interactions.
Say you like me, you better count the ways.
All right, before we get to that first question, listening to this podcast does not mean we have a doctor-patient relationship. Our intention is to educate and entertain you. Nothing we say is intended or recommended as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own physician or other qualified health professional regarding any medical questions or conditions. Our first question comes from Bill. I know psychiatrists are in very high demand right now due to the pandemic, and I'm having trouble getting anyone to respond to my emails about starting treatment. Maybe my problems are not severe enough, and you can point me in a different direction or tell me what I need to get a psychiatrist's attention. As background, my wife is pregnant with our first baby, and it's bringing up some childhood memories that are very hurtful. I was not molested or suffer from physical abuse, but I did have some punishments and verbal lashings that were severe. Sometimes I get very angry, though I try to control it. I'm worried about what kind of parent I'll be to my child. Do you have to have had a trauma to be in therapy? If I was not physically abused, do I qualify for therapy? How bad does it have to be? If it's not too much to ask, I wondered if you could tell me how you as a psychiatrist evaluate whether someone like me can change. Would you tell me if I'm making progress along the way?
So I guess I want to start for Bill by just saying that I feel how kind of vulnerable he's feeling. It sounds like it, or my hunch is anyway, that it took a lot of courage for him to reach out and try to get help. And so I can totally understand that it would feel discouraging and maybe even kind of personal that if he's not hearing back from the psychiatrist he's reaching out to. And maybe we can kind of go through the question, and there's a lot of parts to his question, but I guess I just want to validate that, and including that it can be a really tough process finding someone at all. I mean, I know we've talked about fit, but it sounds like finding someone at all right now is tough.
Yeah, because I totally get that too, that he feels like it's a rejection, but I don't think that means those people don't think you qualify for therapy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of many possible interpretations, but it's definitely not where I'd go first.
Right. So I think we need to kind of get past that and realize that there are some systemic problems that you're going to have to overcome, which may mean broadening your search, looking at all types of mental health professionals, looking at mental health centers, thinking about telehealth options if you can't find somebody within your geographic area.
Absolutely.
And, when you make those requests, I would just keep them pretty short. And then if you do get a call back or an email back, you can schedule that phone appointment and go into more of those historical details. But I think just keeping it really short, looking for availability.
The first barrier is finding someone who has space, right? And, I don't like turning people away, but sometimes or often my practice is also at capacity. So I think, even to spare yourself maybe some of those potential feelings of rejection at first, it may be just inquiring if people are taking new patients, and then if they are, going from there. But that's kind of the first step.
Yeah.
Because that would honestly be my first guess if you're not hearing back from people, is that their practices are full. I would obviously like it better if people called you back and just told you that. But, I think getting in is step one, or getting a phone consult is step one.
Yeah. And then as far as who qualifies for therapy, I mean, there's no bar to clear. I think the people who benefit the most are people who are curious about themselves and want to change, but that's about it. I mean, it can be very problem focused. You can say, I have episodes of anger that make it hard for me at work or in my marriage, or I want to try to improve a relationship, or I get anxious, or I can't sleep, or I drink too much. I mean, or like you asked, wanting to talk to somebody about the kind of parent you're afraid you're going to be is a perfectly fine reason to start therapy.
Yeah. Who qualifies for therapy? People who want help working on their problems. Like, that's it. If someone's interested in therapy, they qualify for therapy. If someone wants to, or wants to get help working on issues in their life, that's how you qualify for therapy. Like, that's it. There's not a bar to cross. There's not convincing to be done. But whatever Bill's struggling with is enough, right?
Yeah.
Like we all need other people sometimes, and a therapist is a special kind of help, but I don't think that there's any, I don't know. I think most people could benefit from it. I mean, it's sort of a joke. It's like everybody needs therapy. Probably, people need therapy from time to time. My dad always says that, everybody needs a psychiatrist at some point in their lives. He's just lucky he hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Lucky. Yeah, I think.
I mean, but really, yeah, go ahead.
Bill is really focused on the trauma or abuse. And I just wonder, I mean, that's one of 1,000 different reasons somebody may get into therapy, but I have 100%. To wonder, is he thinking that he has to have a certain origin story? But, part of therapy is actually figuring out your narrative and then making some effort at change, or maybe it's about mourning what didn't happen in your life. But no, not everybody's story has to start with some kind of trauma or neglect. Sometimes people think that if they're going to therapy, even it must mean some admission that they have some major mental illness, and that's not true at all.
I don't know for Bill in particular, but I think sometimes even with my patients, if someone's saying, it's really not that bad, or I don't, I shouldn't feel this way because I've been fortunate in all these ways in my life. Sometimes I think that's a way to get away from your own pain, right? Like if you can kind of focus on how you don't deserve it or you don't need the help, then you don't have to focus on like what really did happen or how much you really are suffering. It's kind of a distraction from like just what's so.
Yeah. People often say, I think I'm just blowing this out of proportion, or I'm just overreacting.
And it's like, for what? Like, what's the end game there?
Yeah. Well, if we shift over to that question about being a new parent, I get men in my office at least once a year who are struggling with this fear, the kind of parent they're going to be. And so I first just want to normalize your reaction.
Yeah, dude, it might mean you're just paying attention. Like, this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. We revisit our childhoods when we become parents. We also revisit our parents' abilities as parents when we see them become grandparents, because sometimes they change and sometimes they don't. But, I can't speak to Bill specifically, but I will say that as a general rule, the expectant parents that ask these kinds of questions, the people who think about their kids' emotional well-being and development, aren't usually the parents I worry about.
Great point.
Yeah, it's not just a desire to be a good dad. It's the effort that you're clearly willing to make that'll help you be the kind of dad you want to be. And it's okay to ask these questions. Am I cut out for this? Will I make the same mistakes other people made?
I think you're right. And that it is kind of a really rich opportunity, trauma or not, like you said, to think about your relationships with your parents, what they did or didn't do for you. And that, your relationship with your wife will change in Bill's case, right? I mean, having a child is a hugely impactful thing that brings up memories about the past, hopes and fears about the future, reevaluation of everything. And again, I don't think that's all bad. I think that means you're paying attention. But especially, I don't know, Dave, maybe you can speak to the male perspective on this, but I think this stuff doesn't always get paid attention to, because the idea is we should just only be happy about a new baby. And of course, it's like a miraculous, joyous event in someone's life, but it's also pretty terrifying if you're paying attention, even if you're just, have been a person.
Yeah, I worry about the people that go into it more blindly. So I would say...
Right. If you're just like, I've got this, whoever is running around saying they've got this, I am far more worried about them.
Right. Unless they were the oldest of 12 and they helped raise a bunch of siblings, or I don't know. Even then,
my grandma was the first girl in a family of 17.
Wow.
So I guess she was an expert.
I mean, she knew what she was getting into, at least.
She knew what she was getting into, and definitely certain domestic tasks were well trained. But some of it's the doing, and some of it's the feeling. And it sounds like Bill's worried about his feelings.
Yeah. Besides a therapist, and I do think you should talk to one. You mentioned the anger part and things, but the other thing you need to talk, or the people you need to talk to, are just other fathers that you think are good enough parents. Anyone you're close to that has kids, friends, if you have a brother, even if your own dad, if you have a good enough relationship with him, and ask them how they felt when they were in your position. You're not going to relate to all of them, but there are definitely some that feel the exact same way that you're feeling. And then they became surprised at how different it actually was when it came to pass.
Is that what happened to you?
No.
Okay. You didn't fail to prepare. No. Okay. I've met you before. Sorry. That wasn't a good question.
Yeah. So when I'm anxious about something, I try to drown the anxiety in facts. I over-intellectualize everything because, I mean, there's nothing worse than sitting with an emotion, right?
I mean, that makes you a really good doctor.
But
that obsessiveness, yeah.
hey, but honestly, I actually really do like. There's a lot of books that I do like, baby books, parenting books, and maybe I shouldn't reveal just how nuts I was. But I mean, I read 3 books just on lactation. I mean, and I pulled out my Harriet Lane from medical school.
Yeah.
I read up on
You're also married to an OBGYN.
Just in case there's a question that came up.
I know. I mean, I'm just saying there's multiple sources of information.
I read all my pediatric textbooks on common childhood illnesses. I had to get recertified for CPR that year, and I actually paid attention to all of the baby and infant stuff that I'd never really paid attention to before.
You're doing chest compressions on a doll, contemplating your life and your future child's mortality.
Yes.
Yeah. Suddenly everything has a lot of gravity. Okay, I'll take that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm not saying my way at all is the right way, but
you can relate to the anxiety.
I can relate to the anxiety and the uncertainty, and it was a very much desired thing. I mean, I'd gone 20 years not wanting to be a parent until suddenly I did want to be one, and then that was my entire focus then from that point on.
Yeah.
So, but I do think what I do want to come back to with the books is that I do think there's some value in looking for information. And also, it doesn't even matter the book. If your wife is reading a book about parenting or child development, read that book and then talk to her about it and talk about your anxieties with her and your fears, because it's possible that she has some doubt too, or some anxieties that you guys can share.
And that the two of you are, embarking on this joint project together. And so I think there can also be something rich and centering about saying like, oh yeah, okay, this big change is coming up. What do we want our guiding principles to be? Like, how can we support each other through this? And I think rather than dealing with your anxiety alone, that could be a really lovely place to connect with your partner as this is happening.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking that, I mean, we did childbirth and I think a couple infant care classes. And maybe the opposite of you, I wasn't as fixated on the information. And maybe that was cocky that I thought I would just figure it out. But even just having those hours set aside to be focused on our future child, be focused on our relationship and our family as a break in, the busy week, I thought was kind of a nice time to just like recenter around that. And maybe in this way too, have a place to put the anxiety, have something to do about it that feels helpful either relationally or informationally.
I think his last question is about capacity for change and monitoring change. And this one's actually easy. Yes, you have the capacity for change. Everyone listening to this has the capacity to change, unless there's a psychopath listening. But I really doubt that unless they're listening from prison. Looking at things can change them.
Yeah. Thinking about things. Bill's even pointing out, I mean, it's painful and not yet helpful, but like something is happening in his mind, even in the process of seeking someone out, right? Like this, it's happening. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's primed for change.
He's ready.
He's ready. Yeah, ready.
He's ready, right? There's a life event, there's pain, there's curiosity, he's asking questions. But yeah, I mean, that obviously I believe in people's capacity to change, or I wouldn't be in this job. And even that question of like, how do I entice a psychiatrist to take me? I mean, I know he didn't put it that way. It's like if somebody wants to show up and try, like that's kind of all it takes for me and probably for a lot of people.
Yeah. Hey, I don't do dad jokes. I promise. I'm way too sophisticated for them. But
really? Oh, my pediatrician said it was genetic. So maybe you have a mutation.
I don't do them, but because of Bill becoming a dad, I thought this one's appropriate. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change. So if you want it and you're willing to, you can make the change.
Oh man. Yes. You got a real laugh.
That was real?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally thought you were like just being, I thought you were.
I mean, I knew it was coming, but I like the energy. There's some Venn diagram of psychiatry jokes and dad jokes that maybe really, really appeals to me. that is actually, I was laughing with delight at how perfect that joke was for this answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So as for monitoring progress, any decent therapist is going to want you to take a step back and look at your trajectory. They're going to be reminding you that change is not linear. Every day is not better than the one before, but you just want to see that the overall trajectory is positive because there's going to be setbacks.
Yeah, we need a trend.
Yeah. And, patients, especially when they get better, they don't remember what it was like when they weren't doing well. And that's actually one of my jobs is to keep that information handy so we can, monitor what's working and what's not. So yes, to your question, yes, your monitoring progress is a part of therapy and your therapist will talk to you about that.
And you know what I'm going to say? Yeah. And then talk to your therapist about it. If you have questions about your progress, that could be something you want to establish with them too, maybe even early on to say, how will I know I'm getting better? How should we look at this together? You'll get to know their philosophy and then they will also know what your priorities are.
Yeah. Barriers to improvement are enormously helpful to look at.
Well, because, right, if someone could just follow advice or read a self-help book or something, they wouldn't need the therapist. I mean, right, like one theory of how change happens is that the therapy is removing barriers to change. So that's actually part of it. So if someone is resistant or defensive or change is hard, that's actually exactly why the therapy can be helpful, is to look at that and get it out of the way.
Good. Yes. Good point. Good reminder.
Thank you.
All right. I hope this helps, Bill. Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah.
And Bill, I don't know what state you're in, but I did email you back if you need for us to, if you got a list of people in your state, I'm happy to look at that for you. So just let us know if we can be helpful.
Yeah, good idea.
Mm-hmm. All right. When we come back, we'll talk about social awkwardness, being a psychiatrist. This next question comes from Boston.
Hi, guys. I'm really enjoying the podcast. I wanted to ask, though, what it's like when you meet people socially and you tell them that you are psychiatrists. Do they think that you are analyzing them immediately? Does it make for some awkward conversations, or do people feel uncomfortable or act differently around you? I'd love to hear more on this. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. So, do people think you're analyzing them immediately? Yes, because I am analyzing them, but it has nothing to do with being a psychiatrist. I've been doing that long before becoming a psychiatrist. The only difference is that I have better words now to describe somebody and maybe a theoretical framework.
That's exactly what my husband says. People will ask him, is she analyzing you? Like, what's it like? And he's like, it's the same as when we were dating and she was a waitress. Like, this is how I am. I'm interested in people. I want to figure out what makes them tick.
Yeah.
The curiosity is real, but it's not, I have no desire to diagnose or treat anybody.
Right.
But, the analyzing is just part of the package.
I mean, it's nice now I get paid to tell people what I think about them. That is a difference there, but otherwise it's not really welcomed in conversation.
I mean, sometimes with friends, I'll be like, wow, that sounds like if I were a therapist, I would say.
You've said that to me before.
Oops.
I'm like you, though. I mean, obviously, I'm curious about people. I think I have a lot of intuition about people that has nothing to do with being a psychiatrist. When I was growing up, it was helpful to realize that what a person says isn't always what they mean, or that they may have motivations or incentives that aren't always clear. But, it's part of who I am. It just is part of the package, and it's not something I turn off or on.
Yeah.
But
that doesn't mean that we're necessarily looking for pathology.
No, I have no interest.
I want to be clear to also say, I mean, don't get me wrong, I can judge people fine, but the analyzing, thank you. The analyzing isn't automatically judgmental, right? There's also, I feel like in this kind of capacity, my range or the breadth of what I think is kind of acceptable enough human behavior or quirkiness is actually pretty wide, right? It's going to take a lot for me to think somebody's really nuts.
Right. You have a larger sample size.
I do.
Right.
Yeah. Right. It's whatever you think you're giving at I don't know, in polite conversation at school drop off, that probably isn't going to set off any alarm bells for me.
Yeah. I have this isn't related to this question or people in polite society, but I hear what you're saying. I've now decided there are no paraphilias that surprise me anymore.
Oh, yeah?
I feel like I've now heard...
Can you tell the listeners what is a paraphilia? Or what are you thinking
just like a kink or a fetish or something like that.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, I think I've now heard so many that I don't know that I can be surprised ever.
I just feel like, all right, that's a thing. I've never heard of it, but I'm sure it's a thing.
Right. Yeah. It's something that my patients have taught me. I'm just like, all right, well.
Okay. Yeah, dude, people are infinitely weird, which is why it still pays to be curious.
It does. And not to assume that you know everything, right? Because you're always going to learn something new. You're going to be like, oh, I did not know that could go there. So.
Right. Like, and yet here we are.
And
I think probably the flip side to, or some synergistic process of what you're saying of the intuition and the curiosity is also that I think in general, people do feel comfortable telling me things, right? Like that there's some unspoken part, sometimes I want it, sometimes I don't. And maybe it's because I announced myself as a psychiatrist, but sometimes it comes up later in a conversation and maybe a person feels they've over disclosed or something. And it's like, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable, but I think I do sometimes end up receiving more information than your average bear.
Yeah. And I would say, my guess is that
which is a privilege and it's kind of cool.
But I think a lot of people that go into mental health, I'm guessing that they have similar stories that people think of as a good listener. People divulge information to them. You become this like secret keeper and
you're trustworthy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you don't invite that. It just starts happening to you. It's probably one of the things that gets you going into the field to begin with. I don't know.
At a cocktail party, if I, tell somebody, this happened to me once, that I was a psychiatrist and it turns out he was a Scientologist and that ruined that.
Yeah.
We were having a nice conversation up until that point. That's awkward. Oh man, your whole religion's organized against my profession. I guess this is over. So I guess that wasn't even awkward. It just was a deal breaker.
You just ended the conversation.
Rarely has it seemed so clear.
Like, okay, then.
Bye-bye. See you never. Yeah. But then I think there's this other part because we do spend our time talking to people in this deliberate way and thinking, and that this is maybe the part that I think is maybe more of a function of the practice is maybe I am weird or maybe I'm weird with small talk.
Yeah, I don't like small talk. It bores me and I'm not that good at it. I'm good at the part of getting somebody to talk about themselves because that's what everybody wants to talk about anyway. And that's fine with me. Like, I prefer that. I'd prefer to listen and be curious.
Yeah, give me some weird information. Like, that's a lot better than the weather or whatever.
Yeah, right. So that's fine because I do think that as soon as somebody finds out what I do for a living, it's a conversation stopper about 80% of the time. And as you said, I think sometimes people think that there's now this power differential because they've been talking about themselves the whole time. They finally got around to, curious about what I might do. And then they think that they feel uncomfortable, and they could rectify it just by asking me questions, and I'd be happy to reveal something to make them feel better.
Right.
But they don't. They get too uncomfortable and don't really care enough, so they just walk away.
Right. Well, and then I do this weird thing because you're right. It is a conversation stopper, and I don't want to have a power differential or something, and then maybe I am almost avoiding it. Right. Or I never lead. I mean, I suppose in some ways it's boring, but I never lead with, oh, what do you do for work? Because that means then I have to say what I do for work.
Right. Yeah. I never bring that up. In fact, I try to deflect it. I deflect 3 times before I tell anybody. Yeah.
Oh, I'm a doctor.
I don't even say that. I say, I'm in healthcare.
I give them a location. They're like, that's not a job.
I did the same thing once. Somebody asked a pointed question of what do you do? And I said, I have an office right over there on the corner. I didn't even...
I just sit there. I'm an idea man.
I peddle in ideas. That's right.
Yeah. That's so weird. Right. But yeah, but they are normal conversations. I mean, there's that thing that I feel like goes around where it's like, nobody wants to hear about your dreams. I do. I want to hear about people's dreams.
Seriously, I do not want to hear it. Only really? That's when I have to be at work. I really do have to be
you don't have the training. That's where it gets weird because then people don't even know what they're saying. If they knew.
I was covered in snakes. I don't think you need too much training on that one.
I mean, sometimes the cigar is just a cigar and sometimes it's a penis. Yeah, I do. I mean, if I know the person well enough, I don't want to hear a cashier's dream necessarily, but somebody who I have like some context for their life, like that's just more information for imagination, I guess. But
I was in
maybe
a
that's
I was in a store not too long ago, and I didn't even tell
uh-huh.
the guy what I did,
Uh-huh.
and he was telling me about his whole life, and then he did ask me what I did, and then it was this very detailed psychiatric and addiction history. I didn't ask a single question the entire time, and he wasn't even offloading or venting. I think he just thought that that would be interesting to me. He just thought, well, you're in the business, and so let me tell you a
Oh.
4-decade-long story about everything I've experienced.
What'd you do with that?
I mean, he didn't need me. I was just I guess I could have observed the process. Be like, it doesn't seem that it matters that I'm standing here. You were just going to tell the story today, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, then you sound like you're at work, and more importantly, you sound like a real weirdo. Like you can't do that.
Yeah, right.
Even
Well, so
if the
how do you?
conclusion is like, yes, we're weird.
Well, so what? And you were. Sorry, I got us
Mm-mm.
off some tangent or some topic. You were
I don't think
saying
so.
there are times because of small talk, maybe you just take the conversation in a different direction.
Yeah, and because I tend to prefer, again, not always, and it can go too far, but I tend to prefer deeper, more interesting, right? Maybe more intimate. I'm not going to press somebody, but I think that, sometimes maybe I will kind of overshoot.
Like get too
Even with
provocative about
friends.
something, or
Yeah. Okay, so I have this story. I had a friend in college. We were good friends in college. I hadn't seen her for several years. And then I ran into her at somebody else's baby shower, and she had a new baby. And I'm like trying to catch up, and, she seems tired, and probably I'm like projecting or thinking. And I'm like, hey, friend, you can tell me how much it sucks to have this baby. You should tell me, like, I will totally get it if the first time your baby slept through the night, you rolled over, you woke up and thought they were dead and then went back to sleep anyway, because what were you going to do about it? And I'm pretty sure I just like put the nail in the coffin of our friendship. It was like, she was horrified. Probably that was not near her experience. She was merely sleep deprived. But I was like, we're going to go here. We're going to connect. I don't think that's what she was there for. And I think I totally missed it. But yeah, I just thought I'm getting weird. I need friends. And I need friends that aren't psychiatrists.
Yeah, I have maybe a similar thing. I don't know. Because I'm trying to avoid being bored to death. If I'm in a good mood, I will sometimes, if it's something on my mind, I'll just start talking about it. And that's a conversation stopper. I mean, so it's not being a psychiatrist. It's just clearly I'm not very good at social interactions.
That's right.
Yeah, I was thinking about Bill's question earlier. So
yeah.
So when I became a dad, I had this period of time I became interested in how parents relate to their children, whether they're the same or the opposite gender. Because I noticed how like my wife was related to my child and how I was, and I would observe things at the park. And I was just curious. I had not read anything about it. I'm sure there's people who have written papers about it or something, but I just got really curious. I remember just being at the park and like striking up a conversation, and just immediately, because it was on my mind, asking that question about, do you think you would relate to your child differently if you were the same gender? And it was like I'd ask them how many times a day did they beat their child. I mean, it was like, it was a good conversation stopper is what I'm trying to say.
Right. You were just free associating. Your mind just introduced this question.
Right.
I don't know. What are we saying? It's like we're good at asking questions, but then we get self-conscious, and then we don't ask enough questions, and then we jump in and we're like sort of misattuned. Like
we're not painting ourselves in a very good light here.
Yeah.
Right. Just like, can you tell me about your kinks? Because I know that won't surprise me.
Right. I'm just making a list, and I want to see if I can get surprised. I haven't been surprised yet. What do you got?
Right.
I'm just saying, it gets weirder. We're not the worst, maybe, is what I'm trying to say.
That's your point. We're not the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. I have friends, I swear. And you should not feel afraid to ask us questions. It might make us less weird.
One other thing. This is something my wife has pointed out. It's that if I'm being sarcastic or just teasing somebody, sometimes because they know what I do for a living, they take it more seriously than I intended. Oh. So I do have to be careful about that. So there's a real
That's
win.
Interesting. Yeah, that if you're just being like snarky, Yeah.
Because then it's like you really have leveled something against them. And especially because with all sarcasm, right, there's always a little kernel of truth.
I
So
know,
it
which
can,
is why you're excellently sarcastic.
but it can also feel then really harmful because you're going right at the most sensitive spot that you've picked up on. But you think it's all in jest. But yeah, so that has happened to me before.
I can see that.
So that just means we're really good at insulting people, I guess, or we could be good at it if we chose.
We could be good. We could be insult comics.
Yeah, like Triumph.
I don't know why. I do not know why this was a thing. I actually think it's a little messed up. But when I was in middle school, we went on this camping trip with my history class. And on the bus, there was a cut down contest where the teacher sponsors were keeping track of who got the most insults off on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I won. Is
good
actually
for
the
you.
moral of the story. I mean, right? Psychiatrist in the training, grade 7.
Wow. It is odd that was happening with the teacher present. Yeah. I don't know. I maybe that answered the question. We probably answered more questions than anybody wanted to have answered.
But it's on brand. This is what we're talking about.
There you go. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please send us a question by email or an audio message at our website, callthepsychiatrist.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Call the Psychiatrist. And if you've got any benefit from the show, we'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review on the platform you're using right now to listen to the show. Thanks.
Bye. I'm smiling.
Can you hear it? I'm smiling.
Can you hear it? Can you hear me?
Did I sound like I was smiling?
You sound like you have an Invisalign.
Mom, I don't want to go to the party.